What is beginning at this time will slowly prepare humanity for new soul faculties. These new soul faculties will become more clear sometime between 1930 and 1940. The years 1933, 1935, and 1937 will be especially significant. Faculties that now are quite unusual for human beings will then manifest themselves as natural abilities. At this time, great changes will take place, and biblical prophecies will be fulfilled. The most significant event of our time is a deep, decisive transformation in the soul faculties of man. Faculties that, because this is precisely the purpose of the age, will cause souls seemingly out of themselves to exhibit certain clairvoyant powers that were necessarily submerged in the unconscious during Kali Yuga. There will be a number of souls who will have the singular experience of having I consciousness and at the same time the feeling of living in another world, essentially an entirely different world from the one of their ordinary consciousness. It will seem shadowy, a dim presentiment, as it were, as though one born blind were to have been operated on and had his sight restored. Through what we call esoteric training, these clairvoyant faculties will be acquired much more readily, but because humanity progresses, they will appear, at least in rudimentary form, in the most elementary stages in the natural course of human evolution. If humanity overlooked these events, it would be a great misfortune. Even if they were unable to perceive the great occurrence that can take place, it will nonetheless occur. The event to which we refer is that human beings can acquire the new faculty of perception in the etheric realm. A certain number of human beings to begin with, followed gradually by others, because humanity will have 2,500 years in which to evolve these faculties increasingly. Human beings must not miss the opportunity offered in this period. To let it pass unheeded would be a great misfortune, and humanity would then have to wait until later to make up the loss, in order ultimately to develop this faculty. This ability will enable human beings to see in their surroundings something of the etheric world, which up to now they have not normally been able to perceive. The human being now sees only man's physical body. Then, however, he will be able to see the etheric body, at least as a shadowy image, and also to experience the relationship of all deeper events in the etheric. He will have pictures and premonitions of events in the spiritual world, and will find that such events are carried out on the physical plane after 3 or 4 days. He will see certain things in etheric pictures, and will know that tomorrow or in a few days this or that will take place. Such transformations will come about in human soul faculties, resulting in what may be described as etheric vision. And who is bound up with this fact? That being whom we call the Christ, who appeared on earth in the flesh at the beginning of our era. He will never come again in a physical body. That event was unique. The Christ will return, however, in an etheric form in the period of which we have been speaking. Then human beings will learn to perceive Christ, because through this etheric vision they will grow upward toward Him who no longer descends as far as into a physical body, but only into an etheric body. It will therefore be necessary for human beings to grow upward to a perception of Christ. For Christ spoke truly when He said, quote, "I am with you always, even unto the end of the earth." Unquote. He is here. He is in our spiritual world, and those who are especially blessed can perceive Him always in this spiritual etheric world. St. Paul was convinced through such perception in the event of Damascus. This same etheric vision will be cultivated as a natural faculty by individual persons. To experience an event of Damascus, a Paul event, will be an increasing possibility for human beings in the coming period. We thus comprehend spiritual science in a completely different sense. We learn that it imposes a tremendous responsibility upon us, since it is a preparation for the concrete occurrence of the reappearance of Christ. Christ will reappear because human beings will be raising themselves toward Him in etheric vision. When we grasp this, spiritual science appears to us as the preparation of human beings for the return of Christ, so that they will not have the misfortune to overlook this great event, but will be ripe to seize the great moment that we may describe as the second coming of Christ. Man will be capable of seeing etheric bodies, and among these etheric bodies he will also be able to see the etheric body of Christ. That is, he will grow into a world in which the Christ will be visible to his newly awakened faculties. It will then no longer be necessary to prove the existence of Christ through all sorts of documents, because there will be eyewitnesses to the presence of the living Christ, those who will experience Him in His etheric body. Through this experience, they will learn that this being is the same as the one who consummated the mystery of Golgotha at the beginning of our era, and that this is the Christ. Just as Paul was convinced near Damascus that this was the Christ, so there will be human beings who will be convinced through experiences in the etheric realm that Christ truly lives. The greatest mystery of our time is this one concerning the second coming of Christ, and it takes on its true form in the way I have described. The materialistic mind, however, will in a certain way usurp this event. What has just been said, namely that all genuine spiritual knowledge points to this time, will often be proclaimed in the coming years. The materialistic mind today corrupts everything, however, and so it will come about that this sort of mind will be unable to imagine that the souls of human beings must advance to etheric vision, and with it to Christ in the etheric body. The materialistic mind will conceive of this event as another descent of Christ into the flesh, as another physical incarnation. There will be a number of persons who, in their colossal conceit, will turn this to their own advantage by letting it be known among human beings that they are the reincarnated Christ. Accordingly, the coming period may bring us false Christs. Anthroposophists, however, should be people who will be so ripe for spiritual life that they will not confuse the second coming of Christ in a spiritual body, perceptible only to a higher vision, with such a reappearance in a physical body. That will be one of the direst temptations that will beset humanity. To help humanity overcome this temptation will be the task of those who learn through spiritual science to raise themselves to a comprehension of the Spirit. It is in this way, therefore, that we must speak of the second coming of Christ, and of the fact that we raise ourselves up to Christ in the spiritual world by acquiring etheric vision. Christ is always present, but He is in the spiritual world. We can reach Him if we raise ourselves into that world. All anthroposophical teaching should be transformed in us into the strong wish to prevent humanity from letting this event pass by unnoticed, but rather, in the time remaining at our disposal, gradually to educate a humanity that may be ripe to cultivate these new faculties, and thereby to unite anew with the Christ. Otherwise, humanity would have to wait a long time for such an opportunity to be repeated, indeed until another incarnation of the earth. The possibility that these faculties might be acquired by humanity in general, and that this great event might, by means of these naturally developed faculties, be understood by all human beings, would be impossible for a long time to come. We thus see that there is indeed something in our epoch that justifies the existence and the activity of spiritual science in the world. Its aim is not merely to satisfy theoretical needs or scientific curiosity. Spiritual science prepares human beings for this event, prepares them to relate themselves in the right way to their period, and to see with the full clarity of understanding and cognition what is actually there, but that may pass human beings by without being brought to fruition. This is its aim. The time will come when the spiritual world will again be able to stream into our souls just as light and color stream into the eyes of a blind man who has been operated on and had his sight restored. This light and color already existed in his environment, but could not stream into him because the organs capable of admitting them were not yet opened. And once again, new dispositions of soul, new soul faculties, are slowly being prepared. Indeed, people everywhere will gradually begin actually to see, although only in shadowy outline and in its first elements, what we call man's etheric body. The human being of today sees only the physical body. The capacity to see the etheric body will gradually be added. People will have learned that this etheric body is a reality, or they will think it is an illusion of their senses, since such a thing, so they will say, does not exist. Things will come to a point at which many people who have such experiences will ask themselves, quote, "Am I really mad?" unquote. Although it will be only a small number of people who will develop these faculties during the next few decades, spiritual science is something that will spread, because the responsibility one feels is for something that in reality is taking place. It must take place in accordance with the natural course of events. Why do we teach spiritual science? Because phenomena will appear in the near future that only spiritual science will be able to grasp, and that will remain misunderstood if spiritual science is not there. These faculties will develop relatively quickly in the case of a small number of human beings. It is quite true, to be sure, that through an esoteric training man may ascend even today far beyond what is preparing itself for humanity. At the same time, that to which man can ascend in our day by his own efforts through appropriate training is already being slightly prepared in small beginnings for all of humanity. It is something about which it will be necessary to speak, whether one understands it or not. Only a few decades separate us from that moment in time when such phenomena will have begun to be more frequent. Quote, "Lo, I am with you always, even unto the end of the world." Unquote. This expression says to us that Christianity is not merely what books once described it to be, or what was learned in recent times. These words tell us that Christianity is not merely what is embraced today in the form of this or that dogma, but that it is something living, which contains within it the vision and experience of revelations, something that will unfold with ever-increasing strength. We stand today only at the beginning of the working of Christianity, and anyone who has really united himself with Christ knows that ever new revelations will spring forth from it. He knows that Christianity is not giving way, but that it is growing and becoming, that it is something living, not dead. The event of Damascus will repeat itself for many persons, and we can designate this event as a return of Christ, a return in the Spirit. Christ will be present for all those who will be able to ascend as far as the vision of the etheric body. He descended only once in the flesh, at the time when he lived in Palestine, but in his etheric body he is always present within the etheric atmosphere of the earth. Because human beings will be able to develop etheric vision, they will also be able to behold him. The return of Christ thus will come to pass for humanity, through the fact that human beings will advance to the faculty of beholding Christ in the etheric. This is what we may look forward to in our time of transition. It is the task of spiritual science to prepare human souls so that they may be able to receive Christ, who has come down to them. The best use to make of our present incarnation is to prepare ourselves for that insight that will become for us the future of Christ. We must learn to understand in the right sense this return of Christ. Humanity will be granted a period of about 2,500 years in which to develop these faculties. 2,500 years will be at his disposal to attain etheric vision as a natural, universal, human faculty. until human beings advance again to another faculty in another time of transition. During these 2,500 years, more and more human souls will be able to develop these faculties in themselves. It will make no difference whether they are then living their lives between birth and death, or whether they are dwelling in the spiritual world after death. The period of human life between death and a new birth will also be passed differently if human souls have experienced the reappearance of Christ. The life after death will also change as a result of this experience. This is why it is so important for the souls now incarnated to be well prepared for the Christ event that is to take place during this century. This event can bring light to human beings only if they awaken to this new perception and thereby open themselves also to the new Christ event. We do not merely pursue anthroposophy because we are curious to know all kinds of truths, but because we know that these truths must be used for the salvation and gradual perfecting of humanity. Christ will later appear to humanity in many forms. The form that he chose for the events in Palestine was chosen by him, because at that time human beings were dependent upon the faculty of unfolding their consciousness on the physical plane, and through this conquering the physical plane. Humanity is called upon to develop ever higher faculties, however, so that the course of evolution may be able again and again to make new leaps. Christ will be there, in order that he can be experienced also on these higher stages of knowledge. Christianity is in this connection not at the end, but at the beginning of its influence. One will gradually begin to see the etheric. It is of no matter in the laboratory whether a man has a strong or weak moral character. This is not the case, however, when one is concerned with etheric forces. Then one's moral constitution affects one's results. For this reason, it is impossible for modern man to develop this ability if he remains as he is. The laboratory table must first become an altar, just as it was for Goethe, who as a child kindled his small altar to nature with the rays of the rising sun. This will happen before long. Those who are able to say, quote, "Not I, but Christ in me," unquote, will be able to work with the plant forces in the same way that mineral forces are now understood. Man's inner being and his outer surroundings work into one another reciprocally. What is outside transforms itself for us, depending on whether our vision is clear or clouded. Even in this century, and increasingly throughout the next 2,500 years, human beings will become able to behold Christ in his etheric form. They will behold the etheric earth from which the plant world springs up. They will also be able to see, however, that inner goodness works differently on the environment from evil. He who possesses this science in the highest degree is the Maitreya Buddha, who will come in approximately 3,000 years. Quote, Maitreya Buddha, unquote, means, quote, the Buddha of right-mindedness, unquote. He is the one who will make clear for human beings the significance of right-mindedness. This will all lead human beings to know in which direction they must go. We must undertake to transform abstract ideals into concrete ideals in order to contribute to an evolution that moves forward. If we do not succeed in this, the earth will sink into materialism, and humanity will have to begin again, either on the earth after a great catastrophe or on the next planet. The earth needs anthroposophy. Whoever realizes this is an anthroposophist. The end of Lecture 3.